They made 4 hit movies together, but what happened off-camera was the real shocker. For 50 years, his famous co-star stayed quiet, while Burt Reynolds told everyone she was the one that got away. Now she's finally spilling everything: the jealous fits, the controlling behavior, and why she calls him the worst kisser ever. This is the story about Burt Reynolds you never heard before. Burt Reynolds was born on February 11, 1936, in Lansing, Michigan. His father, Burton Milo Reynolds Sr., served in the military during World War II. When Burt was still a child, his father was drafted into the U.S. Army, so the family moved to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, for 2 years. After his father was sent to Europe, Burt, his mother, and his sister returned to Lansing. When the war ended in 1946, they moved again, this time to Riviera Beach, Florida, where his father became the chief of police. Growing up in a strict household shaped Reynolds into a tough and determined young man. He adapted quickly to new places, but found a real home in Riviera Beach. At Palm Beach High School, he became a standout football player. He played as a fullback and earned first-team All-State and All-Southern honors. His performance on the field led to several scholarship offers, and his dream was to play professional football. For years, there was speculation about his birthplace, but in 2015, Reynolds confirmed that he was born in Lansing. He left the city when he was 7, but Lansing still claims him as one of its most famous sons. In 1954, Reynolds accepted a football scholarship to Florida State University. He played as a halfback for the Seminoles and showed incredible promise. In his freshman year, he rushed for 134 yards and scored 2 touchdowns on just 16 carries. His athletic future looked bright, but everything changed in his sophomore season. During the first game of the year, he suffered a serious knee injury. Later that year, a car accident made things worse and even led to the removal of his spleen. His football career was over. He spent 2 years trying to recover, but his body never fully healed. The dream he had worked so hard for was gone. Although devastated, Reynolds never lost his love for sports. His time at Florida State led to a lifelong friendship with Lee Corso, who later became a well-known football analyst. In the 1980s, Reynolds also co-owned the Tampa Bay Bandits of the USFL. But at the time of his injury, he had no idea what to do next. In 1956, he enrolled at Palm Beach Junior College, where he met Watson B. Duncan III, an English professor who saw potential in him. Duncan convinced Reynolds to audition for a play called Outward Bound. At first, Reynolds wasn't interested, but he gave it a shot. As soon as he read his first few lines, Duncan handed him the lead role. That moment changed everything. Reynolds had never considered acting before, but once he stepped on stage, he felt something he hadn't felt since football. He had a new purpose. His performance earned him the Florida State Drama Award in 1956, proving Duncan's instincts were right. From that moment on, Reynolds pursued acting with everything he had. Duncan became more than just a professor. He became a mentor, pushing Reynolds toward bigger opportunities. Reynolds would later joke that Duncan tricked him into acting, but he always credited him with setting his career in motion. In 1959, Reynolds landed his first major television role in Riverboat, an NBC Western series. He played Ben Fraser, the boat's chief pilot, starring alongside Darren McGavin. The show gave Reynolds his first national exposure and let him show off his natural charisma. But behind the scenes, tensions grew between him and McGavin. After 20 episodes, Reynolds left the show. It was a setback, but one that wouldn't last long. In 1962, Reynolds joined the cast of Gunsmoke, one of the biggest TV shows of its time. He played Quint Asper, a half-Comanche blacksmith who became a deputy under Marshal Matt Dillon. Over the next 3 years, Reynolds appeared in more than 50 episodes, becoming a fan favorite. The role gave him the chance to prove himself as a serious actor. Even though Gunsmoke was a success, Reynolds knew he wanted more. Milburn Stone, who played Doc Adams on the show, encouraged him to leave while he was still rising. It was a gamble, but Reynolds took the advice. Not long after, he started landing bigger film roles. His breakout came in 1972 with Deliverance, a movie that cemented his status as a Hollywood star. Directed by John Boorman and based on James Dickey's novel, Deliverance followed 4 businessmen on a canoe trip through Georgia's Kahoolawassee River. What started as a weekend adventure quickly turned into a brutal fight for survival. Reynolds played Lewis Medlock, the group's fearless leader. He was strong, confident, and completely at home in the wild. It was the kind of role that suited him perfectly. But filming was tough. The cast had to do their own stunts, and there was no insurance to cover injuries. Reynolds wanted the action to look as real as possible, so when his character was supposed to go over a waterfall, he insisted on doing it himself. He ended up cracking his tailbone. The worst part? When he watched the footage later, Boorman told him it looked like a dummy going over the falls. The film was intense. It had moments that shocked audiences, including the famous dueling banjos scene and a violent attack on Ned Beatty's character that sparked national debates. With a budget of just $2 million, Deliverance earned $46.1 million and was nominated for 3 Academy Awards. Critics saw Reynolds differently after that. He wasn't just a television actor anymore. He had real screen presence, and Hollywood took notice. But just as his career was reaching a new level, something unexpected happened. That same year, Reynolds posed nude for Cosmopolitan magazine. It was April 1972 when the issue hit newsstands, featuring him stretched out on a bearskin rug. The idea came from Cosmopolitan editor Helen Gurley Brown, who wanted to challenge ideas about male objectification. Reynolds agreed to do it, mostly for fun. He didn't think much about what it would mean for his career. The magazine sold over 1 million copies, and overnight, he became a global sex symbol. His face was suddenly everywhere. He was on posters, t-shirts, even underwear. The attention was overwhelming, but at first, he laughed it off. As time went on, though, he realized the spread had done more harm than good. He later called it the worst mistake of my career. Even Deliverance, the film that should have been his big moment, was being talked about in the same breath as the nude photos. He believed it hurt the film's chances at the Oscars because some people in Hollywood no longer saw him as a serious actor. While the photo was seen by some as groundbreaking, Reynolds felt it had put him in a box. He didn't want to be remembered just for his looks. He knew he had to prove himself again. In 1974, he did just that with The Longest Yard. Directed by Robert Aldrich, the film told the story of Paul Crewe, a former NFL quarterback who ends up in prison and is forced to lead a team of inmates in a football game against the guards. Reynolds was perfect for the role. Crewe started off as cocky and selfish, but grew into a leader who earned the respect of his team. Audiences loved it. The film made $43 million at the box office, a huge success for the time. Critics also took notice. Aldrich himself said Reynolds was a much better actor than he's given credit for. The film wasn't just a sports movie. It tapped into the rebellious spirit of the 1970s, a time when people were questioning authority more than ever. The final football game was more than just entertainment. It was a fight for dignity and respect. It became one of the most memorable sports sequences in film history. Meanwhile, Sally Field was born on November 6, 1946, in Pasadena, California. Her mother, Margaret Field, was an actress known for films like The Man from Planet X, 1951. Her stepfather, Jock Mahoney, was a stuntman and actor who played Tarzan in the early 1960s. Growing up in a Hollywood-connected family might have seemed glamorous, but her childhood was far from happy. Years later, she revealed that Mahoney was emotionally manipulative and physically abusive. She kept the pain to herself, never even telling her mother. Acting became her escape. In junior high school, she discovered that performing gave her a sense of freedom. It was the one place where she could express herself without fear. After graduating from Birmingham High School in Van Nuys, California, she took a step toward making it her career. She joined an acting workshop at Columbia Studios, where she caught the attention of casting agents. At just 17, she landed the lead role in the sitcom Gidget, 1965 to 1966. The show followed a teenage surfer, full of curiosity and charm. Audiences loved Field's energy, and she quickly became a fan favorite. Gidget lasted only one season, But summer reruns turned it into a surprise hit. That success led to another opportunity, one that would make her famous, but also leave her feeling trapped. Producers offered her the lead role in The Flying Nun, 1967 to 1970, a sitcom about a novice nun whose lightweight frame and unusual habit allowed her to fly. Field was hesitant. The concept felt silly, but her stepfather and industry executives pushed her to accept. The show became a success, running for 3 seasons. Millions watched every week, but Field felt stuck. She wanted to be seen as a real actress, not just a wholesome TV star. She knew she had to change the way Hollywood saw her. Instead of waiting for better roles, she took action. She joined the Actors Studio in Los Angeles and trained under Lee Strasberg, the same coach who had mentored stars like Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Strasberg's method acting techniques forced her to dig deep into her emotions. She told him, "I want to know how to be an actor," and he took her seriously. His training helped her break free from the limits of her past roles. Her transformation became clear in 1976 when she starred in Sybil, a TV movie based on the true story of a woman with dissociative identity disorder. The role required her to portray 16 different personalities, each with distinct voices and mannerisms. It was the kind of challenge she had been waiting for. Critics praised her performance, calling it raw and deeply moving. In 1977, she won an Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress, proving she was more than just Gidget or the Flying Nun. Then came Smokey and the Bandit. Before Burt Reynolds became the face of Beau Bandit Darville, he had someone else in mind for the role, Jackie Gleason. At the time, Gleason was already a legend, best known for The Honeymooners. Reynolds believed he had the presence to carry the film, but Hal Needham, the director and Reynolds' close friend, had other ideas. From the start, he saw Reynolds as the Bandit. He knew Reynolds' charm and confidence would bring the character to life. Gleason didn't end up playing the Bandit, but he got a role that suited him perfectly: Sheriff Buford T. Justice. The character was inspired by a real Florida Highway Patrol officer that Reynolds' father had known. Gleason's version of Sheriff Justice became one of the most memorable parts of the movie. His ability to improvise gave the character a natural humor that felt effortless. Many of his best lines were made up on the spot, turning a simple role into a standout performance. The chemistry between Reynolds and Gleason shaped the film. Reynolds played the Bandit with an effortless cool, while Gleason's sheriff was loud, determined, and constantly frustrated. Their cat-and-mouse chase became the heart of the story. Even though their characters were enemies, their performances worked together in perfect balance. That dynamic helped Smokey and the Bandit become a massive success. At the time, Reynolds was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. His involvement alone was enough to bring audiences to theaters. That gamble paid off. The movie, made on a budget of just $4.3 million, became the second highest-grossing film of 1977. It pulled in $127 million at the box office, falling behind only Star Wars. That level of success made Reynolds even more popular and cemented Gleason's role as one of the greatest comedic actors of his time. While Reynolds was the clear choice for the Bandit, Sally Field's casting as Carrie, or Frog, was not as simple. Universal Studios had other actresses in mind. At the time, Field was respected for her work in TV and her performance in Sybil, 1976. But she wasn't seen as a Hollywood leading lady. She later admitted that some critics even called her ugly, which made her doubt whether she could land major film roles. Reynolds disagreed. He personally called Field and asked her to take the role. There wasn't even a finished script when she agreed. She was hesitant, but something about the project interested her. She saw it as an opportunity to change how audiences viewed her. Her decision turned out to be a career-defining moment. Her chemistry with Reynolds became one of the film's strongest elements. Their banter and flirtation felt natural, partly because much of it wasn't scripted. They improvised many of their scenes, making their relationship feel real and spontaneous. That energy made her character more engaging and helped Smokey and the Bandit stand out from other action comedies of the time. At the center of it all was Hal Needham, the film's director. He wasn't a traditional filmmaker, he was a stuntman, and one of the best in Hollywood. By the time he directed Smokey and the Bandit, he had worked on over 4,500 TV episodes and 310 films. The idea for Smokey and the Bandit came from something unusual: bootlegging Coors beer. In the 1970s, Coors wasn't available nationwide because it had no preservatives and had to be kept cold. Transporting it across state lines was illegal, but people still tried. Needham found the idea so interesting that he started writing a script while staying in Reynolds' pool house. Despite his experience with action and stunts, directing a film came with challenges. Just days before filming, Universal cut the budget from $5.3 million to $4.3 million. Out of that, $1 million went directly to Reynolds, leaving even less for everything else. Needham had to get creative. He made every stunt count and relied on his cast to bring energy to their roles. Universal didn't expect the film to be a major hit. They released it only in the southern U.S. over Memorial Day weekend in 1977, assuming it would just be a regional success. But audiences loved it, and word of mouth spread fast. By July, Universal expanded its release nationwide. The response was bigger than anyone predicted. Adjusted for inflation, the film's box office earnings would be worth around $500 million today. The movie's success led to sequels, turned Reynolds into an even bigger star, and proved that a low-budget film could compete with Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. Needham went on to direct more hits like Hooper, 1978, and The Cannonball Run, 1981, but Smokey and the Bandit remained his most famous work. Burt Reynolds and Sally Field met in 1977 while filming Smokey and the Bandit. Their chemistry was immediate. Field later said it felt like they had known each other forever. In just 4 days, their connection felt as deep as if they had spent 4 years together. Reynolds had admired her since the 1960s when she starred in Gidget. Field was drawn to Reynolds' confidence and charm. She felt beautiful and wanted in a way she never had before. Their chemistry was undeniable, and after the massive success of Smokey and the Bandit in 1977, they teamed up for 3 more films. In 1978, they starred in The End, a dark comedy about a man coming to terms with his own death. Reynolds played the lead role and also directed the film, while Field played his ex-wife. The movie wasn't as big as their other projects, but it showed they could balance humor with serious themes. Later that year, they reunited for Hooper, a film about the world of Hollywood stunt performers. Reynolds played Sonny Hooper, a veteran stuntman dealing with the physical toll of his dangerous career. Field played his girlfriend, offering both support and comic relief. The film was filled with thrilling stunts and behind-the-scenes Hollywood action, which made it a hit. Reynolds, who loved fast cars and big action sequences, was in his element, and Field proved once again that she could shine in any role. By 1980, they returned for Smokey and the Bandit 2. This time, the story took an even wilder turn, involving an elephant being smuggled across state line. While the film didn't get the same critical praise as the first, audiences still loved seeing Reynolds and Field together. The charm of their performances kept the sequel entertaining, but it was clear that Reynolds' box office dominance was starting to fade. During this time, Reynolds was at the peak of his career, but he also made choices that he would later regret. In 1983, he turned down Terms of Endearment, where he had been offered the role of Garrett Breedlove, a charming former astronaut. The role went to Jack Nicholson, who won an Academy Award for it. Reynolds later admitted that passing on the film was a mistake. He had chosen to make Cannonball Run 2 instead, a decision that kept him locked into lighter comedies rather than serious dramas. Another major opportunity came in 1988 when he was considered for Die Hard. Reynolds later claimed he didn't remember turning it down, but insiders believe he was approached for the role of John McClane before Bruce Willis was cast. The film became a huge hit and launched Willis into action hero stardom. Reynolds had also turned down roles in Star Wars and The Godfather, 2 of the biggest films of all time. Looking back, he joked that he had been stupid to pass on so many legendary parts. While Reynolds' career choices led to missed opportunities, Sally Field was making the smartest moves of her career. In 1984, she starred in Places in the Heart, playing Edna Spaulding, a widow trying to save her farm during the Great Depression. Her performance won her a second Academy Award for Best Actress, and her acceptance speech became one of the most famous in Oscar history. With excitement, she told the audience, "I can't deny the fact that you like me. Right now, you like me." Over the years, the quote has often been misremembered as, "You like me, you really like me." But the message was clear. She had worked hard to prove herself in Hollywood, after being typecast in TV sitcoms like Gidget and The Flying Nun. Winning her first Oscar for Norma Ray in 1979 was a big moment, but this second award felt like true validation. As Field's career continued to rise, Reynolds started to struggle. By the mid-1980s, audiences were losing interest in his signature car chase comedies. Films like Stroker Ace in 1983 and City Heat in 1984 failed to impress, and attempts to change direction with Stick in 1985 and Heat in 1986 didn't help. At the same time, Field kept proving her range with critically acclaimed roles, including Steel Magnolias in 1989. Meanwhile, their relationship was far from the fairy tale it appeared to be. One of the biggest cracks in their relationship came in 1980, when Field won her first Academy Award for Norma Ray. This should have been a moment of celebration, but Reynolds refused to attend the ceremony with her. He didn't believe she would win and didn't see the point in going. Even earlier that year, when she was invited to Cannes, he discouraged her from attending. It wasn't just about jealousy, it was about control. He wanted her world to revolve around him, and her success threatened that balance. His possessiveness went beyond her career. Field recounted how Reynolds would sometimes pinch her face and demand details about her past relationships, as if he needed to erase anything that existed before him. She later reflected that she had fallen into a familiar pattern. Because of childhood trauma and an instinct to take care of others, she found herself trying to make Reynolds happy at the cost of her own identity. She changed how she spoke, how she dressed, even how she moved, all to fit his expectations. She eventually realized she had stopped existing as her own person. Despite all this, Reynolds wanted to marry her. He proposed multiple times, but Field always declined. She later admitted that deep down, she never believed he truly wanted marriage for the right reasons. She suspected it was more about maintaining control than building a real partnership. She also knew that marrying him wouldn't fix anything. Their problems ran too deep, and a wedding wouldn't erase the tension and hurt that had already built up. Decades after their breakup, Reynolds never stopped talking about his love for Field. In a 2015 interview with Vanity Fair, he called her the love of my life and admitted he deeply regretted losing her. He described their time together as the happiest years of his life and confessed that he was the one who ruined it. "Men are like that," he said. "You find the perfect person, and then you do everything you can to screw it up." Their love story began in 1977 on the set of Smokey and the Bandit. They became one of the most adored couples in Hollywood, and their connection was undeniable both on and off screen. But while the public saw a picture-perfect romance, the reality was more complicated. Reynolds admitted that his own behavior had played a role in their breakup. Even years later, he still saw her as the one who got away. In a 2016 interview, he revealed that he had spoken to Field's son, who told him that she still talked about him. Despite his repeated declarations of love, Field remained mostly silent, responding only with short, measured comments. When asked about Reynolds' words, she simply said, "I have no response, really." For years, Field avoided discussing their relationship. After their split in 1982, she focused on her career and raising her children. While Reynolds spoke openly about his lingering feelings, she kept her past private. She won 2 Academy Awards, built a reputation as one of the most respected actresses in Hollywood, and rarely looked back. When she did acknowledge Reynolds in interviews, it was usually in passing. She never engaged in a public back and forth, letting his words stand on their own. That changed in 2018 when she released her memoir, In Pieces. For the first time, she shared her own perspective on their relationship, and it wasn't the love story Reynolds had often described. She wrote that he was controlling and distant, creating a dynamic that made her lose herself. She described their bond as a perfect match of flaws, but admitted that she often put his needs before her own. While there were moments of love and affection, she also felt suffocated. By the time she left, she realized she had shaped herself into someone who existed only to please him. Her revelations painted a starkly different picture than Reynolds's romanticized version. While he spent years speaking about how much he loved and missed her, she described their relationship as complicated and, at times, painful. Still, she acknowledged that there was real affection between them. Their chemistry was undeniable from the moment they met, and despite everything, she believed he had cared for her in his own way. One of her most surprising confessions came years later, in 2022, during an appearance on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen. When asked about her worst on-screen kiss, she didn't hesitate. Burt Reynolds. The audience was shocked, considering their real-life romance. She laughed as she explained, saying the experience involved a lot of drooling and that kissing him simply wasn't enjoyable. It was an unexpected twist in their story, a reminder that even the most passionate relationships have their flaws. Reynolds never got to read In Pieces. He passed away in September 2018, just days before its release. When asked later how she felt about that, Field admitted it was a relief. She knew the book would have hurt him, but for her, writing it was necessary. It allowed her to tell her side of the story, to break free from the version of their romance that had been told for years. In the end, their love story was not a fairy tale. It was complicated, messy, and filled with contradictions, just like real life.